Yes, people, welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to another video. It's been a while, right? But this weekend, big game against Arsenal. And, you know, the last couple of games we've played against Arsenal this season, I've had a bit more of hope. I've had some sort of like optimism when it goes to, trying to get either 3 points, trying to progress to the Carabao Cup final. And for some odd reason, we've always showed up with just n- teams not being available. We don't have players available. Um, and it just feels like we're always basically handicapped. And so here we are again, right? And I think this weekend's game is going to be very important for both teams. Arsenal can't slip up anymore. Um, 3 points is going to be very, very important to them. I think anything other than Arsenal win this weekend, it's going to be very tough. You have Man City breathing down your necks, and the last weekend I think they got away with it. I think they definitely got out of jail with that Spurs performance. Definitely should have. That even that second goal that Spurs scored, I think it was legitimate, but Arsenal have had some luck. I think they've had some luck, and I feel like it's going to continue into Sunday's game. We have some key players out, Cucurella, Estaval, Fafana's, suspended. And I guess the question would have been like, even if Fafana was available, does it make a big difference? And to a degree, I think yes. But then you look at our side of things and you're asking yourself, what's the defensive setup going to look like? Who's going to come in for Fafana? Is Gusto going to start again a left back instead of, Hato? And there were a few things that I saw in that Burnley game. I think someone like Augusto should not be um, in the team for a couple of games at least. I think that no look, first time cross was just absolutely unprofessional. It was disrespectful, and more importantly, it led to nothing. It was pointless. It was stupid. So I think Hato coming in, giving us that balance with that left foot. Um, Defense, you gotta go with Sar, you gotta go with Chalobah, you gotta go with Reece James, Sanchez, and go. Um, Gotta pack out the midfield. Go with the midfield three: Santos, Caicedo, Enzo, and you just run out Neto, Joao Pedro, and Cole Palmer. And like when we played at the Emirates in the second leg of the Carabao Cup, I've seen, just to bring it back to that, like I've seen people go Chelsea were very toothless, and to be honest, like you can't really do much when you only have a half fit Cole Palmer and Esteval that had just come back from Brazil. No Pedro Neto. And look, Pedro Neto hasn't really been a lot of people's flavor. I think he has been disappointed at times this season, to be completely honest. But just even having that as an option out there, Garnacho is not really being favored right now. So it feels like we just have to run it with what we got. And playing Delap and Joao Pedro as, your only two attacking players at the Emirates was always going to, it was not going to probably amount to much. Arsenal didn't need to commit in that game. In this game, I do think they have to commit. If we go in with the same kind of performance, with the same sort of defensive discipline, um, and take a point away, I think for us, a point in this game is not necessarily the worst thing. I believe a point for Arsenal is probably going to be a more terrible outcome for them than us. So I think we can go in there and frustrate Arsenal. Arsenal, yes, they had, they've been the best team by points in the Prem, but by no means have they been scintillating in any way. So I think defensively, if we could do a job, frustrate Arsenal for as long as we can, they're gonna have to commit. They're gonna have to commit to get the 3 points, and then you could have, some spaces to exploit. You can hope to see Neto running in behind, Timber. You can hope to see Joao Pedro, making the ball stick up front. You're gonna hope to see Cole Palmer, making up for basically costing us all 6 points in the last two games against Leeds and then against, Burnley. So I think this could be a game where he could step up again. Cole Palmer, one of our best players, but I think in this game, we're going to need him to really, really show up. We're going to need him to step up. Midfield, Enzo. I think Enzo would need to be on it. I think Enzo will have to be a bit better than I have seen him in the last couple of games. Against Burnley, we had so many opportunities to just kill that game. You know, just and one of my things is you don't have to win every game 2-0. There's certain games where you're not going to have to score multiple goals to kill it. You can score one goal and defend that lead. We've seen great Chelsea teams of back in the day having to just score one goal against like a West Brom at home and then just see it out. 1-0, defensive, just sweeping everything up, just keeping it tight in the back gets you points as well. That's the thing. Like, I don't think you always have to score multiple goals, but we also don't have the personnel to just sit on a one goal lead. So then it feels like we always have to get another goal. And I don't think that truly represents, you know, us right now because yes, we can score goals, but we just can't keep goals out of the net. Hence why it feels like we got to score multiple goals. But this weekend, it's going to be tough. But we don't have to chase the game necessarily. I think the onus right now is on Arsenal, which I believe should kind of play to our advantage a bit. Arsenal, they attack a bit, however they're gonna do it, but then we have to be very clinical when we have an opportunity. Neto has to be crisp with his actions. Palmer, you see the pass, play to Joao Pedro. Pedro has to be clinical. Your midfield three, they have to be compact. They have to be, solid. And I do believe with the midfield, we're fine. Like this Chelsea team, midfield is not our issue. Even scoring goals is not necessarily our issue. It's the center back partnerships. And that's something we definitely have to address in the summer because going into another season with Chaloba, Tosin, I definitely know he's gonna go. But someone like a Chaloba being your first choice center back, preference, I just don't think takes you anywhere. You're gonna be back here again fighting for top four, a top five battle. I think now this is where you have to bring in immense quality, but again, knowing how our directors move, this is just it's a pointless ask where it feels like we have these conversations every time, and then every time they just disappoint us. So it makes absolutely no sense. They just keep disappointing us because it feels like us, the normal, just and customers could see what they could do so much better than the people who are actually running and calling the shots. So it's weird. But this game on Sunday, look, we have an opportunity to close the gap on Villa. Villa dropped three massive points to Wolves today. And even when you look at the likes of your Man United, winning four out of the last five games, they've gotten 13 points out of a possible 15 has really brought them all the way from wherever they are. And if they win this weekend, they go third, joint on points with Villa, but with a better goal difference. And it's like, this is really what it's about. You win a couple of games in a row, you've put yourself in a great position to really be challenging. Like you've put yourself in a fantastic position. And I wouldn't even say United have been pulling trees. Like, yes, the performance against Arsenal, good performance, great win against Liverpool. I mean, against Man City, they got the dub. But then you look at teams like West Ham, they needed, a late equalizer. The last game, they needed a late winner. It's just even against who was it that Sesko scored against Fulham? They also needed a late winner. So they have been pretty effective. They've been very professional in their performances and they're picking up points. But they haven't really been like, they're going to be clearly running away with it, bona fide third position, and then everyone else is going to be trailing. I don't think so. I think we all have inconsistencies in our performances. we're all gonna drop points at at some point. Um, but United right now, they've capitalized on that great form. They've capitalized on the fact that Villa have been just dropping, their level, their quality, and dropping in, points. And United have capitalized one win, and they could legit do it. So it's annoying. I'll be so honest. Like it's annoying, but I think we're still in a good enough position where like we can still make top four. So I do hope that this weekend brings us a bit more of, some decent quality at least. I'm expecting, Palma, I'm expecting Joao Pedro to step up. These are the guys you look forward to show character, to show leadership. And it's gonna be difficult. It's genuinely gonna be difficult, but we'll see, man. Just don't lose. This is my thing. Just don't lose. Because if we lose, then everyone else could just pull away from us. So it's going to be tough. Another thing that I did want to talk about really quickly was the Champions League draw. So this is what it's basically looking like right now. Um, we play PSG. Galatasaray play Liverpool. Real Madrid play Man City. Atalanta, they play Bayern Munich. And then on the right side of the draw, you have Newcastle, Barcelona. You have Atletico Madrid, Spurs, Bordeaux, Glimt, Sporting Lisbon, and then you have Arsenal, Leverkusen. And honestly, this is a shitty draw. It's a very, very shitty draw. I mean, look at the left side of this drawer, and it's just stacked with so much quality. You know, like anybody on the left side would have preferred to, draw Galatasaray or Atalanta. But then again, knowing Chelsea, dropping points to Atlanta and Karabag, would we even really be focused enough to beat Galatasaray? Because for some reason, when we play the so-called smaller teams, it feels like there's a lot of complacency in our game. You're gonna see guys doing the no look cross again. You're gonna see guys just taking it easy, resting on their laurels. Maybe the bigger games we will show up to be counted for. Playing PSG, that game is gonna be very, very intense. It's gonna be a very interesting game because they're gonna have a lot of stuff, a lot of points to prove after we smacked them in the Club World Cup. The excuses that we're tired, they played more games, yada yada yada. Everyone played the same amount of games in that competition. It was in the same stadium, the same weather was impacting both sides. So it's not like, we got any type of favors when it came to the Club World Cup. But playing PSG, at least a positive thing I could take out of this is the first leg is away in Paris. So you go to Paris, you do a job, you come back to England, and you carry it through. I think that's the best way I could really say this. And look, we could beat PSG. We've beaten PSG before, so this is not really something new. And when you look at the matchup, especially in that midfield, I think we have, PSG have like the technicians, and we have technicians, and we also have the physicality. And that was one of the things I really was banking on in the Club World Cup. Yeah, I did think we probably would have lost maybe narrowly, but our players have showed us that they can step up for these big moments, and I'm going to trust them again. Caicedo, Enzo, Lavia, Santos, these guys are all in the squad to play in the Champions League. So I'm going to bank on them. Galatasaray, Liverpool. This is a funny one because, yeah, Liverpool, they haven't been great at all. And Galatasaray could give him a game, to be honest with you. So that game could go any type of way. Man City, Real Madrid, both teams again haven't looked scintillating at all. But I believe they played earlier this year in the Champions League. And did Man City win that game? I can't even remember. But I think Man City will probably knock Real Madrid out anyway. This one is pretty straightforward. I think Bayern Munich they win in this tie. It's either round of 16 between Newcastle and Barcelona. Now, that's a very interesting one. But if I had to put my money on it, I think you know what? This is not even gonna be like what you call it. It's not like an edgy take, but I think Newcastle could actually qualify. I think Barcelona coming to England at St. James's Park, I think could be a whole lot difficult. The atmosphere sometimes at that stadium, it's it could be intense. A lot of the big teams when they go over there, and I'm talking the big English teams, Liverpool, Man City, Chelsea, Arsenal, you could get a bit overwhelmed when you go over there. So I think they could have something for Barcelona. So I wouldn't say that's a foregone conclusion that Barcelona are going to win that tie. I think Newcastle have just as much say in that. Atletico Madrid, I think they're going to qualify. Bordeaux Glimp, look, I feel like there comes a time when that fairy tale story has to end at some point. I believe it might end against Arsenal. Um, so I picked them to beat Sporting Lisbon. Arsenal, I picked them to beat Leverkusen, and yeah, that should be pretty standard, to be honest with you, for the Champions League games. But I don't think these fixtures have done us any favors at all. To be honest with you, they kind of suck. But PSG, yeah, that's cheeks. But we do what we have to do at the end of the day, man. So now let's look at some of these Premier League games coming up this this weekend. Um, just preview that really quickly. Give me one sec. Stay 27th. All right. So tomorrow we have Bournemouth, Sunderland. I feel like this might end in a tie. Normally I would have edged it to Bournemouth, but home form. I typically like to back Bournemouth when they play at home, but I think Sunderland are not scrubs on their own. So I think for me that tie ends in a draw. Burnley, Brentford. Honestly, that could be another tie that ends in a draw. Or Brentford could win it, but I'm gonna go with another draw. Liverpool, West Ham at home. I'm gonna predict a very cagey, maybe 2-1 to Liverpool. West Ham have got, they've picked up some points recently. Their form hasn't been too bad, if we're being honest. In the last five, they've only lost one, which was to Chelsea. So I do see them giving Liverpool a game at least, but I still think Liverpool win that probably 2-1. Newcastle, Everton at home. I think Newcastle handle business. Leeds, Man City. Tricky game, to be honest with you. But then again, we all thought that was going to be the case for Arsenal when they went to Leeds, and Arsenal were very comfortable. Man City cannot afford to drop any more points, to be honest with you. So they just can't. Man City cannot afford to drop any points. And then Sunday, you got Brighton, Forest. I'm gonna go with I'm gonna go with the Brighton win. I'm gonna go for the home team. Fulham Spurs. I'm gonna go with the Fulham win as well. Um, Tottenham are just they're just an embarrassment, to be honest with you. I really thought they had something for Arsenal over the weekend, but they just showed us, it's just a history of the Tottenham. So they're terrible. Don't put your money on them. United, Crystal Palace. Now usually I would have probably backed Palace to get something from this game, and to be honest, they still can. But with the wave United are riding right now, you just kind of have to let that form and that momentum just peter out gradually. I don't think this is the game where United are, you know, they're shaking from this. So I genuinely don't see that happening. But if it were to happen, it will be perfect. If Palace could get a draw, let's just we'll take that. We would definitely take that. Arsenal, Chelsea. honestly, if I had to be completely honest, I think this game probably ends um, either 1-0, 2-0 to Arsenal. Because defensively, I think they can actually, you know, defend a result. Yes, their recent performances, Wolves, hasn't been great. In the last couple of games, they've kind of blown it. Brentford, they blew it, but I think this is a game where at home, I think they might have too much for us. Um, it wouldn't be too much of a blowout. Like this is one of those games where I see it being like 1-0 to Arsenal for a while. And then as we try to get that late equalizer, they hit us with a sucker punch, 2-0, game done. But if we could also go ahead and get a result, that would be perfect. You know, even better, take all 3 points and just keep it stepping. But I just feel like we're gonna have too much to do, because I know Joao Pedro can step up big time. I know Palmer can have his moments of brilliance, and we're gonna need it. Reece James, what do you have for me? Enzo, what kind of performance are you gonna throw out there in this game? Caicedo, are you gonna be able to just don't play to the emotion, just play the game, just just play the game because clearly you're being targeted. Like it doesn't even matter if you win the ball at this point sometimes. Once that reputation is preceding you, it's a wrap. Any little foul, you're gonna get it. Any little booking, you're gonna get it. You're already walking a tightrope. You gotta, avoid 2 cards to miss another game, two yellows. Just play the game, break up play, just keep it easy, man. I think on the bench, we can have Lavia come in. Asu goes back in training. Unfortunately for us, man, Esteval being out for me is a big thing. I think that would have been another, attacking threat we had on that side. So yeah, you go there. You do with what the you do the best with what you got. It's going to be very fascinating to see the battle between Saka and Hato. I want to see how better Hato can handle Saka. Like, there's been times when Hato has been looking very flat-footed. He's getting beaten like a bit too easily for me. I think this will be a game where, he could show us that, that solidity, be a bit more solid, be a bit more proactive, um, and don't lose concentration. Like, and set pieces. Just make sure you give Sanchez enough space to come and collect. So, like exactly what we did in the Carabao, when they get them corners, throw 3 players forward. That's gonna have to be 3 players. They bring out the box, which gives you a bit more less congestion, and your goalkeeper can come and claim. And if he can launch us on one of those counters, we might have something for them. But yeah, my honest prediction is gonna be either an Arsenal 1-0 and Arsenal 2-0. But I hope we get something out of this game, and this is a prediction from more of a just I've seen this against Arsenal 3 times this season already. 1 draw, 2 losses. I mean, the probabilities are saying we deserve a win at a certain point, but are we gonna get it, this Sunday? It's just it's not looking like it. But if we do, I'll take that. So yeah, this was a quick Arsenal Chelsea preview. And another thing I wanted to add before I wrapped up this video because th- I've heard this conversation a lot in terms of how far apart are Arsenal and Chelsea. And I always stick to the point of I don't think it's worlds apart. I think Arsenal are clearly the better team now, but we can still have a conversation. We still have enough good players that when it comes to, if you're comparing, player for player, position for position, I think we have a lot we can, bring to the table as well. And to be completely honest, like I always put it this way, if I give Arsenal just if this Arsenal team, I leave everything just the same way and I take Saliba, Gabriel out and I give them Chalobah and Tosin or Chalobah and Fafana. I struggle to see if they will still have, that defensive solidity and nous. Like I genuinely struggle to see it. Like it just won't be it. And then now if you bring Saliba and Gabriel into this Chelsea team, we've lost 19 points from winning positions. How many of those 19 points would we have recovered from that? I think Gabriel on his own probably wins you at least 6 points, 7 points this season. So that's 7 out of the 19 we lost. And that's just from set pieces, getting you a goal, getting you a win, just on that. Now, think how many points can we still recover again when you're talking about the games you're leading, against Leeds? You're leading 2-0 at home. How many of those points can you recover? How many of those the losses to Brighton, like how many of those happen? Do you know what I mean? Like, I think you have a solid defensive partnership. The likes of your Caicedos, Santos, they don't even go into certain challenges. I think that there's that confidence in the defense to be able to handle certain situations. You don't always have to get involved, and that's how you know dominant I think Gabriel and Saliba have been. I think they gave Arsenal a platform where their midfield could just play. The midfield doesn't have to entirely worry about babysitting, these defenders. They can play on the front foot, they could push up high, they could be confident knowing, you know what, even if you go through my midfield, you still have my generals back there to handle business. But we don't have that. And that's why I think the gap between both teams is not necessarily big when you talk from a defensive point. I just think they just have that center back partnership is so solid that they can win certain games. They can see certain positions, certain games. They can see certain points out, and I think that's just a big difference for me. I don't think we're like worlds apart from them. I think there's still a level we have to catch up to. But I genuinely think, you give me Gabriel Saliba in this current Chelsea team. I think it's a bit better. We don't lose 19 points from winning positions. We're not battling to cement top four. I think we actually are in the top four trying to challenge for the league. That's just how impressive I think those two guys have been. And if we had that, I think we play a lot better. We play on the front foot. You don't have to see Chaloba, mistiming balls over the top. You don't have to see Tosin just getting skinned every time. You just don't see these things. You know what I mean? You just do not see these things. Dropping points to Brentford early in the season, you don't see these things happen. Yes, I'm not saying these guys are perfection. They're not. You've seen it in recent games, but they win you enough points where you don't have to worry too much. So that's for me, that's just a big difference. I think people do this, combined 11, and you probably only see like two Chelsea players in there. But even in the games we've played with them this season, they've been fairly close. 1-1 at the bridge. The 3-2 at the bridge again. It was only by a 1 goal margin. The 1-0 at the Emirates by a goal margin. I think a team that's so much better than you, like they do you like they did Spurs. Like they clean you out 4-1, job done, no conversations, no questions asked. I think that's the level. We just are not consistent enough. But yeah, that's about it. So yeah, hopefully this weekend we're able to get something at least, and hopefully results also do go our way. With Liverpool, Man United. It's looking improbable, but not impossible, right? It's looking like these other teams are gonna capitalize and get their points, but you just never know. And that's the beauty of the prep. Any team can take points from anybody. West Ham can go to Anfield and probably get something out of there. Maybe a draw at most. Palace can go to Old Trafford and win. Like we've seen worse things happen. So yeah, that's just my preview. That's just my perspective on it. Hop in the comments. Let me know how you feel. Like the video, sub to the channel. I'll see you guys at the next one. Take it easy, people. Peace.